Welcome to the July 2023 SECA webinar, Collision Industry Challenges Driving the Need for Transparency Among Stakeholders. I'm Paul Berry, Executive Director of SECA. The Collision Industry Electronic Commerce Association, or SECA, develops and promotes electronic communication standards that allow the collision industry to be more efficient. We also provide webinars like this one to help educate both members and non-members on trends that impact systems, processes, and the exchange of data across the industry. Before I introduce our speakers, I want to take a moment to shamelessly plug our upcoming Connects conference, Connects 2023. We have a great lineup of presenters who will speak on a wide range of issues affecting technology in the collision industry. In addition, we have an exclusive opportunity to tour the Rivian factory and join us as NABC donates vehicles to 3 deserving families. To learn more, visit us at seca.com/connects. Thank you. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists today. We have John Eck, Head of Product Accident Assistance, Global Strategy and Innovation at General Motors. Michael Giarrizzo Jr. is President and Chief Executive Officer of DCR Systems, and David Willett is the Chief Underwriting Officer and co-founder of SPARK Underwriters. Today, we'll be discussing some of the key challenges facing the industry and how transparency can help address many of those issues. As we start the webinar, I want to remind everyone there's no verbal communication between the participants and the presenters. If you have questions during the webinar, please type them in the question panel on the webinar screen, and we will answer as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. Well, welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us today. I would like to kick the ball off. John, as we were discussing this, I think the issue that came up was that technology is advancing faster than shops and adjusters can keep up. Would you take a minute and give your perspective on that issue?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here with the SECA and my esteemed colleagues here. I do believe that we're seeing technology coming at us at a rapid pace from the OEMs, right? The number of ADAS systems that have grown over the years and the complexity of those systems can be mind-boggling for many. You know, you're looking at systems that are completely interconnected. They're hanging on the outside of the vehicles with sensors, LiDAR cameras, and everything else. And they're completely connected to the vehicle driving the vehicle, whether it be computers driving StabiliTrak and what does that mean to calibrate the steering sensors, things like that in a repair. The technology that's coming at us from all OEMs at all price points of the vehicles is astounding. And I'm looking at some of the things that GM has on the road today, or some of the systems that they're building, such as our Super Cruise, which is utilizing adaptive cruise control. It's using real-time precision cameras, sensors, forward collision systems, and they all are working together to create a better driving experience. And for what's the purpose? Why are OEMs driving all of this technology? Well, one, consumers are looking for a type of technology that will keep them safe and ultimately prevent collisions. Here at General Motors, our 000 initiative is a critical component of our strategy, being zero crashes, one of those. And so we're using these systems to help the driver experience, all for the safety of the driver and to decrease the number of collisions and injuries, and obviously most important, deaths involved in collisions. So it's coming fast, and I don't see it slowing down.
Great, thanks. Michael, there's been a lot of discussion that transparency is critical to addressing some of these problems. Would you take a minute and tell us what you mean by transparency? It's a word that gets used in a lot of ways by a lot of people to mean necessarily different things. So if you would take a minute and tell us, what are we talking about when we discuss transparency within the collision realm?
Again, thank you, Paul, for allowing me to be here. It is an honor as well. You know, as John mentioned, this complexity of these vehicles is just skyrocketing. And so transparency to us means full disclosure, open architecture of not only what the manufacturer has designed to be done to the vehicle, but what was actually done. So just an open architecture that allows all stakeholders to understand what's being done to the vehicle to assure that it's going back on the road safe and with a proper repair. And especially, targeting the consumer really is the end recipient of that. That's what we owe. That's what we're responsible for. And the end result of putting them back in a vehicle that has been repaired safely and properly by the manufacturer's guidelines and documentation around that. So it's really an open architecture, full disclosure. I'll date myself when I say I remember when a bad repair was just ugly, and people heard me say this before, where the body line wasn't straight or panel was wavy or the color match was just off, but nobody could get hurt from that. So today it's a completely different ballgame. So complete transparency. Transparency means complete disclosure of everything that's being done to that vehicle.
So as I think about that, obviously transparency with the OEs to the repairers, how does that play out then with transparency to like insurance companies and other segments? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that with the technology advancement of these vehicles, we have to disclose everything that's being done, and the insurer should want to know that as well. The playing field needs to be leveled, meaning that if we're, as collision repairers, if we're held to a standard of transparency, whatever means we determine fits that, but we're held to a standard of documentation, then everybody's the benefit of it. Then we're really getting a true cost of what it takes to repair these cars properly. We talk about there's a lot of ways to repair cars today, but there's really only one correct way, and that's the way that's guided by the manufacturer. So by having a world or living in a world or even competing in a world of complete transparency, we get the real facts of what's going on there. There's no smoke and mirrors. Everybody understands exactly what needs to go on, and the implications down the road of how policies are priced. Everything's affected by it. But the bottom line is that we're all responsible for delivering back a vehicle that's safe with a proper repair guided by that manufacturer to the policyholder, to the customer.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is, if you go back 20, 30 years ago, a lot of times you'd go to the shop, they'd write you a sheet, and that was the full disclosure of what was going to happen. And beyond that, the consumer, the vehicle owner, the insurance company didn't necessarily get much more documentation. So what you're saying is, with transparency, you get everything. You know everything that happened, not only in the estimate, but what happened in the actual repair.
Yeah, absolutely. Some time ago, when even DRP started to come onto the scene, it actually elevated the collision repair industry because we were held to certain levels of documentation that we had never been held to before. Well, now we are so far from that with technology that has to, be to the nth degree, down to the absolute detail level, where something is, very simply can be missed on a vehicle that could actually render it unsafe going back on the road. So it's really a different world today, and the detail around that documentation has to be part of really the standards moving forward.
Great, thank you. So David, as you listen to this from the insurance perspective, obviously that transparency is a good thing. I think everyone would agree with that. But what are the operational challenges, and for that matter, the regulatory challenges that insurers face with this rapidly changing environment?
Hey, I appreciate being on here as well with colleagues and being invited to speak, and thank you for that opportunity, Paul. And remember, yes, I've been in the insurance industry, but I've also been in the automotive industry since 1990, when I went to help form and found many aspects of Universal Underwriters back then. So I'm familiar, and a lot of times the questions being asked about the insurance is the bill payer or the product or the personal auto insurer. I have a lot of knowledge also of being the person that insures the shops. And in that case, I understand the shops, their liability, their aspects, and also them trying to work with the bill payers. And in this particular case, the bill payers, their issues, our industry in general, whoever you're insuring, the insurance industry has been very slow to adapt, admittedly, to technology. And it's created a gap between us and our insureds, us and our other providers and systems. And there's very few in our industry that will downplay that. In fact, InsurTech has been something we've been advocating and talking about, FinTech, InsurTech, all that type of stuff. And there's a lot of play and happen to be a part of a lot of that. But the challenges you see it when you're shops and you're trying to get to departments of insurance and you're trying to get things moved through there, is we can't do anything without getting things through the Department of Insurance largely, because we are, though you say that shops are now scrutinized more than ever, Michael, because of advent of people asking you to report stuff in systems. We report every detail of every transaction all the way across on every little aspect of it. Has a stat code on it, and it's reported to the State Department of Insurance. And so part of the issue is adjustments or changes to that are very time consuming and costly and hard to execute. It's just awkward, and it's hard to make sure you align the data properly, because if the data's not right, it doesn't matter, but that would be the regulatory challenges of meeting it, because it's much easier to go to the Department of Insurance and get your rates updated by just talking about what overall you're impacting and doing an adjustment for the next model year, rather than getting into all the detailed aspects of everything that's new on that new model year versus the previous one. And so largely that's what gets done.
Great, thank you. John and David, I'll throw this to the two of you. Obviously, the OEs have been getting into the insurance industry more in recent years. Does that have an impact on this question of transparency and repair procedure implementation? So John, if I'll throw it to you to kick that off.
Well, thank you. I think from a GM perspective, of course, we've launched OnStar Insurance as our newest insurance endeavor, and they're beginning their rollout phase. And I think what you see when you have an OEM with an insurance arm as well, you're looking at it from a comprehensive view and holistically about that customer experience from an insurance standpoint, and from what happens in the case of an event or an incident with the vehicle. What does that entire experience look like, and how can the insurance company play a role in that experience to, yes, repair the vehicle, but also maintain the brand retention and that customer loyalty. So we're seeing insurance as an opportunity to increase and improve customer retention and that loyalty aspect. And when we look at OnStar Insurance, they've been partners of ours, with my group that I'm working with, and they're very much about that customer experience and safe and proper repair. From their perspective, it is key and critical because it is all within the GM brand, and safety is our overriding priority, and that is our focus. So from an insurance standpoint, looking at it from an OEM, I'm not saying that other insurance or independent insurance companies are any different, but I know from within the GM umbrella, when you have OnStar Insurance and our vehicle brands, we're looking at it very holistically about that customer experience and how every arm can complement each other and have that and deliver that experience that customer is looking for.
Thanks. David, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's awesome that anyone on the OE side is trying to do it. Hey, let the best solution win, the best experience generated win. I think the challenges always come in is because I'm quite certain when he started talking right away, and you would hear the same thing if you talk to Tesla or Toyota or anyone else that's done this, or if you talk to Chrysler when they did it 30 years ago, that you're going to hear them talk about, well, we care so much about our customers and we're wanting to expand that overall relationship and experience. And the challenges is once again navigating that through a Department of Insurance, and then being asked to take care of people other than people that buy your product And at the same time, you got to think of the buying habits of most of the people that buy their personal auto insurance. We just had an article out this last week in Repair Driven News about how people were dropping their personal auto insurance. And it's just that, you know, when people go buy a car, when they go buy certain items, they have an expectation of what they want to be purchased and sold. But all too often, when people go buy their personal insurance, they want the cheapest price. And the thing that exasperates that issue is the people that have the better experience, that don't have very many claims. They seem to stabilize and they're the same people over and over again. Well, if they don't have very many claims, they don't always see the value of having the great coverage. So there's challenges with it.
Thank you. I guess I'll throw this out to all of you, and that is, you know, as we look at implementing and developing transparency, how does that play? And Michael, I'll ask you to lead off on that. Operationally, in the real world, how does that transparency happen?
Yeah, so for us, it's happening, you know, internally, we've developed our own application there where we're dropping documentation, whether it be a photo, a video, a position statement, invoice, or really whatever documentation is required to the line operation. And what we want in the end result is what's really a documentary of that repair. And ultimately think that that should follow the vehicle through its life. So for us, that, you know, that comes in the form of an application, but that's not the only way that it could happen. It's just a requirement or a set of standards of the certain documentation that's needed. So not only what needs to be done to the vehicle, but what was actually done, proof that it was actually done. Yeah, think about this, and coming off of CIC last week, there was, I think, some statistics around 22% or 20% of the vehicles having advanced driving assist systems, and in 5 or 6 years, that's likely to double or triple. And so I think about, you know, in the future, buying a pre-owned vehicle and having the confidence that it's actually going to function the way that it's supposed to be without some type of you know, following some type of documentation that follows it through its life. That repair plan, as we call it, must hold that documentation. And that's why really as an industry, we need to move away from the estimate, because it really doesn't apply anymore. That you realize that that estimate does nothing but mislead everyone inside the process. It really has no place anymore. With complete, you know, disclosure and documentation of what needs to be done and what was actually done, then you have really a storyboard of that repair, regardless of how you price it. You know, that's a whole different issue. But the documentation is now there for what was being done. So it's really just a set of standards of the certain required documents and documentation around the processes and the methodology that was applied to that vehicle, and the validation that it was done correctly, and the validation that that vehicle is ready to get back on the road and protect not only the occupants, but the people driving around it.
So Michael, if I could ask a follow-up question. So obviously it's incumbent upon the shops to provide that documentation and put that into a system of some kind. Are shops prepared to do that? Are they ready to do it? Is it going to be a radical change for a lot of shops to do that?
Well, unfortunately, Paul, yes, it's going to be a radical change for a big chunk of the industry. You know, you have an upper tier of the industry that, through understanding and being involved in certification programs, are already starting to get used to that. But as an industry, and I mean all stakeholders, we need to hold this process accountable. Somebody, this process has to be accountable because people's safety is at stake. And so if we don't all work together to create a set of standards of this is the way it's got to go, again, it's irrelevant of pricing. That's a whole different issue. And that's a discussion between the shop and the bill payer. But the documentation that's required is what we are really owe that vehicle owner, that policy holder in the end result. And whoever may own that vehicle in the future, we owe them that. And so really it's about changing the way that we do work as an industry and getting better, and unfortunately, again, part of our industry will only adopt that when they're forced to. But like history has shown us, when we're forced to do certain things, we step up and do it. And so really creating a world where it is a complete level playing field. And even from, not only from the consumer standpoint, and that's really should be the focus, but from the repair standpoint, the manufacturer standpoint, and the insurer, it should be an absolute level playing field. We should all understand what's been done to that vehicle and have the assurance that it's going back on the road safe.
So, John, I'm going to go off script here a touch. Do you have thoughts on that issue? That how do we help the shops prepare for that and be able to provide that transparency more effectively?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I don't mind going off script on this one. I was jotting down some notes. Michael, you're spot on so many things. But I was thinking about it. What does transparency look like? I mean, we have to be connected to all the stakeholders. And yes, in our world, we typically talk about the repairers and the insurers, but to the conversation, we need to keep our focus on the customer, right? We need to be transparent with that customer, what we're doing, how their vehicle is performing. I'm looking at my one of my vehicle's OnStar reports, and in there we have not just what's your oil life or your tire pressure, but we go through the various systems and tell the customers how are all these systems working together, the airbag system, and we're looking at the deployment, the sensor system, safety belts, the passenger pieces. We're giving them this information. We're trying to be transparent with the customer, whether it be airbag, anti-lock brake, your engine transmission, StabiliTrak, or your OnStar system, all the connectivity. We're trying to be more transparent with the customer as to what's going on with your vehicle. Is everything working? I think when you look at it from the repairer side, we need to stay close to this industry, and I think the OEMs have done great, made great leaps and bounds in understanding what do they need from the OEMs to make this information more readily available or accessible or integrated into their workflow. And as well to the insurance companies, we need to be able to explain, hey, this is the procedure and this is why. And I think my conversations with pretty much every carrier is just help us understand why, right? And I think the OEMs can always do better at that, but it is the process of staying connected to all stakeholders in the industry. And we got to look at the ways to execute that. To Michael's point, it's a monumental task. If you were to try to keep track of all of this information manually, how can we or other third parties such as Sika yourself help automate this process so that we can store it, the repairers can store it and have it accessible for everyone's use in a more readily format. And then I think a conversation that came up, I was on listening into a tech talk yesterday within the industry. Dan Risley brought up from CCC brought up some good points, right? With how are we handling sublet work? When we sublet work out to a third party, what are they doing to the vehicle? Where is that information going? How is that coming back? If they did any mechanical work, did the sensors and did the calibrations happen there, or are you going to do that back at the body shop? So it's not just the one potential repairer, but it's the need that you might do a sublet multiple times out to a third party. They may come to your shop. You may be sending the vehicle out, and it's a monumental task, and it's an issue that I think we all have to take into account. But staying close to each other and being open and having these types of dialogues is critical to finding these solutions. And we're not going to find it alone. There's so many other great third parties in this industry, tech solutions that are helping drive some of these solutions.
Thanks,
Hey,
John.
can I follow up on John's because and I know I think Mike said that earlier too to me before this our call here, but John, you were just so right on with that. The idea of the sublets and all that, quoting Risley and all that. that's one of the issues we work with on shops. We know that it happens with the shops. We know because we insure shops, and that's what I said. So we know this goes on, and we do help with that and understand that when it goes into the evaluation of what we charge somebody when we're insuring them. But I'm going to tell you, within the insurance industry, I'm all the time having to explain that to everybody else that goes on. They don't believe that. They think they just take a car somewhere and that one person works on it and goes back. But in the industry, that's a common misconception. So you can, there's you can be transparent. Other people have to be there, like you said, engaged to see it and then to see it. But and closely related to that, another thing that we work with shops on and also evaluate and determine is, we spend a lot of times on a SECA committee for AI, and we're trying to figure out a better way and a modern way of communicating and noting when accident occurs to a vehicle, and some great work's been done on that. But one of the challenges of it is what do we call things and label it? Well, one of the things that we haven't even got to this point yet, but I'm always concerned about is when we keep talking about repairing the car from the accident, but Michael, how many times is a car brought into you that has an accident, but it's got other damages already on it? So how many times does that happen, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, quite often we do a full, inspection of the vehicle before starting on it, and document that quite often. Where you run into a bit of a challenge is when the damage prior to, or maybe a prior substandard repair, is actually rendered the vehicle unsafe. And so then you've got to get all stakeholders involved, including the customer, and figure out, okay, now what? It's such a different world today, as we all know, and that technology certainly is not going to stop. But the transparent world has to happen, and it's got to happen. It's got to happen quickly. I'll just give an example. We had a 23 Mazda come in about a month ago that was influenced to go to a program shop, and I'm nothing against program shops, because this is actually a pretty well-known program shop. The customer thought it was come to us. We ended up offering them a courtesy post-repair inspection, which we don't do regularly, but we offer that as a certified repairer. And come to find out that it was not only poorly repaired with well burnt on the back of the panel, but it was improperly repaired. There was a lot of work build not performed, and the blind spots weren't working on the rear end of the car. And the customer would have never known it, because actually the repair was pretty. The color matched, right? Finish was pretty nice. So nobody would have ever known that. Nobody would have ever known that. But you think about it, the customer was put into an unsafe vehicle. The insurer was not treated fairly because there was a work build not performed. And the car was actually devalued because it was written up as having frame damage. And that's another thing that really bothers me. And we are a company that's always looking for a solution. So hence, the software that we created helps to create that solution. But when you go to Carfax, if it's got a number of entries around the service work that's been done on that vehicle, we applaud that, right? But if it has, if it's been in an accident and it has that accident report on there, everybody's like, whoa. They look at that vehicle that now it's got this black cloud. But if it had an electronic piece of documentation that was explained what was done in that accident with verification, and you can get confident around what was done, the vehicle was actually restored safely with a proper repair guided by the manufacturer, it shouldn't have that black cloud over it. So we have a lot, going on here as the technology advances, that's going to force us into this transparent world. And the faster that we adopt it, man, the better it is for the consumer.
So, Michael, I think we would all agree that if the shops can fully document the repair, that would be a great thing, good for everyone, provided that there is a way for that information to be shared and to, follow the vehicle and go to the carrier, the vehicle owner, the carrier, and all other stakeholders. How do we do that? How do we leverage technology to make that happen?
Well, again, I'll say for us, and we've developed a pretty cool piece of software application that has fail safes where it forces you to drop documentation in certain buckets, right? And it makes it very easy. It sets it up in sequence so as you read through the repair plan, that documentation is popping up with it. Makes it very, very easy versus, you know, the way we used to do it with a bucket of photos or a bucket of documentation, and you had to go find the photo that actually applied to that. This makes it very easy to understand. It actually creates a documentary, if you will, of the repair process. So, you know, that's not the only way. I'm sure there's, you know, other ways to do that that may be more time consuming and complex. And I'm kidding, but we you know, we enjoy the way that we're able to put together now a repair and how we document it with it. And that software is actually sent off to not only the insurer, but the customer as well. And we encourage customers to keep that documentation because, you know, if they go to sell the vehicle in the future and it has a Carfax report, which it probably will, they can at least substantiate this is the way that it was repaired. So there's ways to do that, but it's just us creating a set of standards, or really, quite frankly, the manufacturer or the carriers demanding that of us, the collision repair industry, to document properly. And it's really our responsibility as stakeholders in this industry to give that customer back a vehicle that's been repaired safely, guided by the manufacturer, and documentation to, quite frankly, prove it.
David, your thoughts on that topic from an insurance perspective?
I think the insurers, we've spent like so much time trying to adopt technology. We are, for the sake of trying to be more efficient, and you know, we always say that it's going to quote unquote provide better service and better all this other type of stuff. It's so much more of the focus, I would tell you, on technology in our industry has been created around efficiencies and in other words, cost savings for the industry. Yeah, assumedly passed on to the consumer as well. But you know, when Michael is talking, and John as well, about all these data elements or things that we ought to care and know about the car. I agree, but then I know what you guys are doing. The harder thing is getting the bill payers that are insuring them to fill that as well. And I think as an industry, we probably need to take our voice collectively, and I know we spend it a lot of times talking to departments of insurance, and we do with the others, and we got some colleagues to get in on, but I think we could behoove it to keep bringing this up as a topic, because I think it could help a lot, because they in many cases are revamping and revising, trying to bring AI into their claims processes. But once again, more of that has been on the efficiency side of it, and trying to get something that does it quicker rather than something that maybe understands the increased data for the idea that Michael is representing.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Paul.
Yes.
Paul, can I add to that comment on that technology? You know, I've been to Michael's facility there in Cleveland, and it's impressive. So what he does and how he does it is extremely impressive. But short of that, I mean, because not every shop has access to his software, there has been great gains in the industry on making that documentation available and more integrated into the existing workflow, right? OEMs make the repair information available. You can, if you want to do it individually, you can go from OEMOneStop.com and find the OEM of your choice and need for that repair service information, what you would need. But there are companies that have done the integration. CCC, Mitchell, AllData have created automated tools with using an estimate and pre-populating collision or the OEM repair procedure information to the line item of the estimate, right? And each one has a little different flow on how it's done, but it certainly takes away from the hours of looking through it yourself and trying to be able to navigate every different OEM's methodology of how they order their service information. So I think, latching onto these automated tools, which then helps keep it in that electronic packet, is a great way to do that. And I know from an OEM standpoint, we've been looking at it from how do we drive that audit capability of, are you following those procedures? Look, we're not the ones touching the vehicles. It's the repair professionals. They're the ones that hold the liability. We understand that, but we're also trying to, help them understand the need to document, and how do we help show them that what is actually being utilized, we're serving up, and then what percentage actually being utilized and recorded, so that they can audit, so that Michael can look at his staff and he can see, who's doing what or who's not doing what and why. Those are things that are going to drive improvement and more transparency in the industry of how do we get better, right? We don't know where the gaps are until we start measuring those.
Yeah, and if I could add on to what John was saying, absolutely. As we're a certified repairer in basically every brand that we represent. As the certified networks grow, the manufacturers are going to need more efficient ways to put oversight on that. They want to ensure that actually you're following the guidelines that they taught us and have instructed us. Some of the manufacturers, a couple in particular, have now started to require that documentation be uploaded on that vehicle, and will then stick with that serial number through its life. Certain levels of documentation. It's time now to make that change. And this is an industry I love, so I want to say this carefully. Unfortunately, a lot of our industry, the collision repair industry, will not provide that level of documentation unless we're forced to. John mentioned the access to OE procedures. There's numerous ways to access them, but certainly OE One Stop is an easy way. Repair Logic is another one. Yet statistics show that still only a minor part of the industry is actually pulling procedures before they start the repairs. A lot of the industries are pulling those procedures when they run into trouble. And so it's really a cultural change that has to happen, in a belief that this stuff is important, a responsible belief that this stuff is important. And just, flying by the seat of your pants by your experience with these vehicles doesn't cut it anymore. I don't care if you worked on the same vehicle last week or a month ago. The technology is moving so fast that the repair procedures are chasing that technology. So those procedures could have changed overnight, and just something simple could make a difference as you're even just disassembling that vehicle. So it's really, our industry has to change and improve. The only way that we're going to get mass improvement across our industry, because we are getting improvement, but it's the upper quartile of repairers that really believe in this. The only way that we're going to get this in mass is really forced transparency, quite frankly.
So, at Sika, we're always thinking about standards, and when you exchange data between different parties, of course, when it's non-standardized, things get a little more complicated. If I take what you said earlier, Michael, about, I think it was Dan Risley raised the issue of, what about, when you outsource something, you sublet an item. And John, when we were talking the other day, you raised the point that there was a time when mechanical and collision were two completely separate worlds. That's not really true anymore. So talk to me, John, if you would, a minute about, how do all these different players across the industry who may have a part in the repair, what do you see, where does that go in the future for allowing that transparency of the complete repair process when you may have multiple hands involved in the repair?
That's a tough question for an OEM. I think it's on all of us to contribute to the answer. That from an OEM perspective, we're looking at ensuring that the customer who owns that vehicle is going back on the road safely. That whether it's them or another owner down the road, that's our brand on the road. Those are our customers, our shared customers in those vehicles in the road. It's not my customer or Michael's or David's, it's our collective customer. We have the responsibility to do what we can to ensure safety. From an OEM perspective, we're making the information available. There is no difference between collision and mechanical. It's a job. It's restoring the vehicle in its entirety, mechanical, electrical, and collision or body work all back together. Even it comes down to paint and finish can disrupt those sensors. So we have to collectively do that. And the systems aren't really in place right now to capture sublet work very well. And I think the conversation I heard yesterday went to the fact that shops are keeping more work in-house, but there's a point that they have to judge that ROI. At what point do they bring that work in-house to make that investment in the facilities, the tools, the training, and things like that, or do they sublet? But then it becomes the sublet. How do you bring someone that's not really integrated into our ecosystem of electronic commerce and documentation? How do you bring that documentation in? It's really, unfortunately, at this point, left up to the shops to bring that into it, because they're the ones that are authorizing that sublet out and coming back in. Michael, you'd have to either confirm or deny that, but I mean, you're looking at work. What do you bring in-house? What do you sublet? That's a judgment call by brand, by make, by type of repair or calibration that might need to be done. But I think we are at a point where we have to find solutions that can account for all that documentation, transparent for all to see and understand what's being done. But we look at the vehicle holistically, and safety is our overriding priority, and we want to see that vehicle on the road safely. And we want it because we want it to perform as it's designed in the event it's in another incident.
Michael, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely agree, 100%. We have tried to pull everything that we can in-house because of that. Really, more than the ROI, and there obviously has got to be a ROI ultimately, but really from the liability standpoint. And then we've gone really through and scrubbed through and evaluate all of our sublet vendors and what documentation are they providing, and are we comfortable with that? That documentation is responsible documentation, obviously, especially when it relates to safety items, but even beyond that. So it is changing world. I've said that over again, where we have to really evaluate what can we do in-house, and that helps to ensure that the vehicle is fixed properly and safely, and what we have to sublet, really scrub through and evaluate those sublet vendors, and are they providing the documentation that we're comfortable with?
Well,
go ahead, Dave.
I would just say that not everybody is doing as good a job as Michael is.
David, but Michael touched on something, which was the liability when you do outsource work to a sublet or a third-party provider. Do you see that being an issue, a greater issue in the future from an insurance perspective for the liability of the shop?
I think the answer, most people say yes. I think it's just always been an exposure there. Because it's being done more at a more critical part of the repair. It probably is going to take on more of an importance or a vital aspect and exposure. Yeah, but it's definitely you might sublet the work, you don't sublet the liability.
Good point. So I'll throw this out to the group and ask each of you to kind of weigh in on this. Where do you see us going in the future? What are the next steps? And after that, we'll take questions from the audience. So if you have questions for the panels, please enter them into the question panel. So John, I'll start with you. Where do you see this evolving to over the next few years?
Well, I'd like to be able to say that we could all settle it before the end of the call, but it's not going to be the case. We have not only the existing ADAS technology on ICE vehicles coming, we have really advanced technology like Super Cruise that is maybe on a smaller subset of vehicles, but it's pretty sophisticated what we're talking about with, you know, autonomous level driving. But now we're also compounded with ICE, or I'm sorry, with the BEV product, battery electric vehicles coming in the hybrids and the variety of systems that we're going to see. It's going to be complex for quite some time. And repairs professionals like Michael and so many others in the industry have the added complexity of not just a BEV vehicle, but how do you handle that vehicle as it comes in? So there's just exponentially more things that they probably need to be aware of. But I do see hope. I see organizations like SECA having an opportunity to step in and say, okay, what can we do to help? How can we sort this out? Some great committee work that's being done that I'm engaged in, and I would invite others listening to engage with SECA in that way to help us find solutions, because it's going to take everybody's input to help us find some of these solutions. We need the third-party tech companies out there that are popping up and growing and investing in this to continue to stay close to the industry, listening to repair professionals like Michael and so many others as to what's it going to take to drive that change. We need the carrier business to you know, evolve with us as well. Certainly, David, we've understood, and as I've talked with you, understand the struggles of the carrier business and the regulatory issues you face. We continue to just need advocacy to drive to what we're ultimately looking for, and that's a safe and proper repair. At the end of the day, we got to do whatever it takes to make that happen. And if it can't be done, then we have to really evaluate whether or not we move further with that vehicle.
David, your thoughts?
Hey, I'm actually excited because I think more is going to be, we have a choice. You have a choice of either figuring it out and being able to take care of it through our own system and our own documentation, or there'll probably be more government regulation to come down and force it upon us. So we have a choice. I think it's coming one way or the other, and so you either have a choice. And I think it also, what that means is that we're going, as an industry, we're going to have to evolve. You're going to have to get better, and I like that. I mean, it's going to be the people that really want to get in, roll up their sleeves, and be professionals and be better at it are going to really separate themselves. They already are. I already see it, but it's going to become more apparent every time the calendar flips over here. So I'm actually anxious and excited to see the way we're going to be forced to pull together and to do all those things that John was just articulating. So I'm actually excited about where we're going. It's going to be a clear separation about who can get it done and who can't.
Thanks. And Michael?
Yeah, again, I'll echo both what John and David said, and I am 100% convinced in the future, it's just a matter of when, you will be able to track the history of that vehicle, very, very detailed history of that vehicle and any repairs that were ever done to it, to assure that that vehicle is going to act in the same way that it was designed in another accident, and people are safe. You know, I challenge all the stakeholders to come together with a set of standards of documentation that each vehicle owner deserves, each policy owner deserves after that accident, so that they not only have a vehicle that's properly repaired and safe, that's first and foremost, but they also have a vehicle that upholds as much value as it can after an accident. We all know there's a degree of diminished, but upholds as much value as it can after the accident. So I challenge our industries, our stakeholders, to come together with that challenge, with that set of standards that we all have to comply with, and force transparency, so that we live in a world in the future where you've got vehicles on the road that are safe and are protecting not only the occupants, but the people around it.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm going to ask Stacy Phillips, our marketing director, to check if we have any questions for our panelists. Stacy?
Yes, thanks, Paul. Our first question is for John and Michael. Do you see the OEMs moving toward tightening up the requirements to be an OEM-approved shop to include some sort of documented and inspected process space sublet vendor for ADAS calibrations?
I'll take first swing at it. I think what you're seeing from, at least from us, I can't speak for any other OEM. I think our first move of what we've done is we've segmented the market a little bit. We are looking, we have different levels in our certification program. We have our general certification program. We also look at specialty vehicles, the C8 Corvette, which takes some special tooling, or a CT6 vehicle that Cadillac that's no longer manufactured. And then we're looking at BEV as well, right? So we're looking at it from, hey, where does a shop want to be? We have done the team, I'll give the credit to the team that works on that now. They've gone spec-based to the tooling to the extent that they can, so that we actually can be more applicable to what a shop might have. I think you're going to see evolution relative to what the requirements might be and how it's tracked, but I can't speak to anything not in the market yet. But I think you're looking at specialty vehicles or BEV being pulled out in that regard relative to GM.
Yeah, and I agree. I believe that the whole game will have to be up around a sublet vendor. We have to first determine really what that documentation looks like. Jumping into the calibration of business as we have, it is not easy to document that calibration. It's possible, but really creating a standard around that as well of what that documentation needs to look like. Even the scanning, for that matter, and the use of OE scanning tools, and the documentation around that as well. Really defining what that documentation needs to look like, whether it's done in-house or by the sublet vendor. It really should be the same thing.
Thank you both. Our next question: what is the best way to ensure consumers are aware of safe, qualified repairs, i.e. post-repair confidence and certification that the vehicle has been calibrated?
Well, I'll take a crack at that one. That's this whole discussion, and what we've been talking about for the last near hour, and the consumers just being told that your vehicle's repaired properly doesn't really go that far. But by providing them an electronic set of documentation around every step and every methodology and everything that was performed on the vehicle goes a long way to delivering that confidence. They could then take that documentation to another local professional or to their dealer or whatever, and have it looked at and have a confidence level that they've got a safe and proper repair. Today, that's just not there. And you have a lot of vehicles that are being, that are going back on the road, and the consumer doesn't have a clue if that vehicle is actually calibrated correctly. And when I say calibrated correctly, because just calibrating and calibrating correctly are two different things as well. So I think it's also educating the consumer. There's a lot of great videos, especially out with the certification programs, out on why that's important. But delivering them that documentation as part of the repair process, is extremely important.
I parallel this with our initiatives that we're going forward on trying to attract new talent into our industry. Once again, it's a truth that we're trying to convey. We're trying to convey a truth that is a great industry to work in, and there's lots of opportunities. Well, we're trying to convey it's a truth to have your car repaired right, and if it's done right, these are what we've done to it, and the value of it shouldn't go down. So I think really, when the question was asked, how do we do it? It's not fun, but I think it's going to take all of us working together to get the message out there and to vibrate it out throughout the industry, and find ways to broadcast it around, because it's just like trying to get talent in. We've got to over communicate it to to get it out there so the public does hear it, because today that's not getting to, that's not on enough of their ideas. I guarantee you, people that are close to you, Michael and John and Paul, and anybody that's in our industry, anybody on the call here listening to us, you guys, we know what it takes most of what a quality repair and how important that is. I know this, people that I come in contact that are friends of mine or people that I've worked with, all of a sudden look up and try to find a shop that is like I describe, or the ones that I go to, because they care about having their car repaired right. But they wouldn't have done that, and they start trying to tell the rest of the family. The problem of it is we need to have broader influence than just the people we happen to run into at church or someplace.
I think you're seeing OEMs doing a better job at, and certainly making an effort to educate customers on what these ADAS systems are that they have on their vehicles. And with that is probably a natural, organic education of making sure they're repaired safely. And so how can an OEM help a customer understand, find a repair facility that might be in their network, or at least helping them understand what to be looking for. And if we can be more transparent with the customers to, this is what we see, that you might want to consider or make sure happens to your vehicle, then we have a better chance at educating them to the point that they want to make sure it's done safely and properly, and finding those facilities that can do that.
Thank you. So our next question is, how does this proposed transparency impact the detail of which estimates will be written, as well as how it will impact the loss percentages the insurance industry is going to be able to sustain?
I mean, I'll take a crack at part of that. As far as the insurance industry goes, it's not my area of expertise. That's David's. He'll have to figure that out. But we're coming to a time where it kind of is what it is. The vehicles, the way that they're to be repaired, are very, very specific. So the condition really dictates that. The estimate has to go away. It doesn't do anything but mislead. It may be perceived by some as a more efficient way, whether it be a photo estimate, or I think there's a company out there that's being tagged Uber for estimating. But I'm not sure how any consumer has a better experience there. If they decided not to get the car repaired, were they actually compensated properly? Be one. And then if they are getting the repair done, they're often confused because the actual repair cost is multiple times the amount of that initial estimate. So I think it really comes down to a change in the way that we go about this, and by building a rule of transparency that really depicts what needed to be done to the vehicle and what was actually done. It really levels out the playing field and, quite frankly, stabilizes the fluctuating costs. They are what they are. And that, like I said, the pricing piece of it, that's a whole separate discussion and, a negotiation, if you will. But the way the vehicle is supposed to be repaired, it kind of is what it is if you're following those manufacturers' work instructions.
And like Michael said, the loss ratios for the insurance companies, that's quite honestly something that any one given year isn't a perfect measure of everything. It's really something that plays out over time. And so any point estimate of a given month or a given year might help you convey a message at that point in time. But really the truth of the matter is how are they doing? And there is definite indications that there's a greater need for rate. And that's what it's going to mean. If the loss ratios goes up, you're going to see increased rates. And there's going to be articles going by, they're increasing rates and all such stuff. But that's what's going to happen. You're going to have, I'm not in that part of the industry doing the personal auto, but if their rates, their loss ratios keep rising, that's the ultimate thing that they can move to get out of it.
Excellent, thank you.
Tag along comment regard to loss ratio. And again, I'm not in the insurance industry business and don't claim to be, but having a little bit of experience in my career, we have to look at really what makes that loss ratio and look for areas outside of the repair of the vehicle for efficiencies, whether it be an oversight or commissions or whatever it might be, as part of a way to keep the overall loss ratio in check.
Thank you all. We're at the top of the hour now, so unfortunately we don't have time for any more questions.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank David, Michael, and John for joining us today. Appreciate the great information, and thank you very much. Please follow Seeker's social media platforms to stay up to date with Seeker events and news. And that concludes today's webinar. Thank you.